One of the biggest impression Swami made on me was when I first went and saw him in 72 and came away to this country with two little kids, a child who was 1 and another child who was 4. And when we landed here back in 72 in 73, I was struck by a strange illness. The doctors could not figure out what in the world was wrong with me. Neither the Mayo Clinic nor anybody in Boston could figure out. I just was extremely, extremely weak, and I couldn't even breathe, and I was laid out in bed. And in those days, the Indian population was very, very small, let alone the Sai community. There was not a single center in the entire East Coast. I knew about Swami, I'd been to him, and the doctors simply could not do anything for me. So here I was with my husband, 2 little babies, and staying in bed, and we had no money, no nothing, no family. For 3 years, it was an intense struggle, and I don't know whether many of you know, there used to be a woman by name Indira Devi. I don't know where Indira Devi is now, but at that time, Indira Devi was very close to Swami. And there was another person called Hilda Charlton in New York. She also was blessed of going to Swami. So Hilda and I met one time, and we spent about 4 hours talking about Swami. And she has a room called the Room of Masters, where she used to have the pictures of pretty much every master. By that I meant everybody going backwards and forwards, and Swami. And so we sat in the Room of the Masters, as she called it, and talked about him for 3-4 hours. And then I had gone into reading Swami's books where he kept talking about his name. All the doctors had given up, and what do? I'm a 27-year-old, 2 kids, nobody in this country. Now what do I do? So I started reciting Swami's name because I'd heard him speak about it before I came to America. But the Swami's name, I would repeat it constantly, but my memory was not very good at that time because I had become so weak. I could not walk, I could not think, I could not talk, or I couldn't even sit up and eat. The only thing I could force myself to say was to say Om Sri Sai Ram. Now I did this for almost 6 months to 8 months, and nothing happened. I was saying it during the few hours in a day. I did not know what to do with myself. What do? I'm not dying. I'm not gone. What do I do with this? So I took to repeating his name every minute of the day, every second of the day. And I did this almost for 1 full year, at the end of which I told my husband, listen, I don't think I want to die in this country. Take me to Swami so that I can die at least in his presence. And what does my husband do? He's got one job, he's got no vacation. So we reserved our seats to go to India. This was back in December 1975. So we were supposed to leave in 2 days, and then I became so severely sick that he could not even have taken me in a stretcher. So we canceled it. Again, in April, we decided to go, and again I became so sick he had to cancel. And then in the month of May, I said, listen, it doesn't matter, even if I die in the plane, just take me there. So we reserved the seats. We are supposed to leave on May 22nd or 23rd, I don't remember. 3 days before that, my husband gets a very strange urinary infection and is bleeding. And I didn't even have a single friend to take us to the hospital. So I called somebody, a stranger, I said, take him to the hospital. And I can't drive, I can't sit with him. So they do some kind of a whatever, the examination, to try to figure out, does he have a stone? There you go, okay. And then the next day he calls me from the hospital because they just brought him back, but he was okay, but he has a very serious infection. And I haven't driven for 3 years, right? I take the key, go to the car, because somebody has to go and see my husband. I say, Sai Ram, I don't know because I can't walk because my balance is not good. They think it is a brain tumor, but they can't identify it exactly where the tumor is, but I have all the signs of a brain tumor. So I get into the car. The hospital is just like 1 mile from my house. I drive the car for about 2 minutes, and I'm so nervous, and I can't see right. So I have to pull it to the shoulders and stop. You wouldn't believe it, I should have stopped at least 20 times before I drove into the hospital. And then I walk up I take somebody's help and ask them to take me upstairs to my husband's side. And he's very groggy. And we both hold hands and we pray for a while. Then I somehow get back home because the children are at home. They don't know what's going on. And he says, Sarod, don't cancel the flight. Let's go day after tomorrow. And he's still bleeding and he still has an infection. So what we do is we go ahead and finally he's able to drive us to the New York airport. It's about 100 miles. We get onto the Air India plane. We get in. And just before the flight takes off, my husband starts the problem again. So the pilot has to announce to see that there's a doctor on the flight. He's in excruciating pain. So he takes some medication. Somebody gives him something. If you could imagine this husband and wife, late 20s, my husband is in the early 30s, with two little kids, both of us so severely sick. We end up in Bombay, and Bombay can be very difficult in end of May and early June. And my parents are in Bangalore, and we tell them we are coming, we want to go to see Swami Strait. So we make our way to Bangalore. My parents take us home. The next morning at 4 o'clock in the morning, in the meantime, before I left, a week before I left, Swami comes in my dream and he says, I'll see you at 10 o'clock. All right? I mean, I don't even think I'm going to live to see him. So he's going to see me at 10 o'clock. But, it's fine. It's a dream. So I end up in the evening, in the morning at 4 o'clock, my parents get the taxi ready, put my husband who is sick at the back, put me at the back, I'm sick. They take these two little kids on their laps, and we take this car and go towards Parthi. Puttaparthi in early June can be a test for anybody's physique, leave alone extremely sick people. And we get closer to Parthi, and it's extremely hot. It's around 9 o'clock, mind you. We are going pretty slow, excuse me. About 10 miles from Puttaparthi, it is very stark. There is not a vegetation we could see. Very, very hot. And the taxis in 1976 were not like the taxis of today. We had a lot of difficulty. And the roads were very difficult. So the car stops. What's wrong with the car? The driver says, Amma, the belt is gone. And I don't even have water because there is a steam coming out of it. He said, you all wait here. I'll go to the next village and get water. And he's walking. And very good. And my mother looks around for a little bush, a tree, where she can put me and the kids because I'm wilting very fast. We find a very thorny bush, no tree. So she takes me and my children, puts us in there, and my husband is sitting in the car in that heat. I don't know how long it took this guy, but he brings back water and fills it up. And he says, Amma, we can go now. So, all right, let's go. We go to Puttaparthi. There's not a soul in Puttaparthi. Our hearts and our souls, you have this terrible sinking feeling. You've come after 3 years, you've made the final journey just to see him, and he's not here. So it's around 9:45 or so. So my mother says, listen, let them go to the accommodation office, whether Swami is here or not. Let's go and sit in the shade in front of Swami's house. So my mother takes me and puts me there. And usually when I become very sick, I would just meditate a little bit I was short of breath a lot. So I'm sitting there and next to my mother, and my husband and my father had gone to get the accommodation. We had closed my eyes, and I'm meditating a little bit just so I can breathe. So my mother shakes me up in a second. He says, open your eyes and see. In those days, all these fancy buildings were not there. And I opened my eyes. Swami is standing in the veranda looking at me and my mother. And he raised his hand. There's no other person there. So I'm thinking something is wrong. Maybe I'm still dreaming. Anyway, I'm sick. I'm probably dreaming. She says, no. And on the other side, in the meantime, my husband and my father had come and they were standing next to us with the two children. So he looked up, Swami said, blessed. And then we had gotten the accommodation. And then my mother said, what is the time? What's the time? 10 o'clock. You see, my journey to Swami after 3 years of excruciating pain, and every minute where I could not breathe. I couldn't breathe even when lying in bed. And that evening, you see, there used to be no sick people or no chairs. There were only 2 lines of people, right? So my mother takes me in the afternoon and puts me at the back so that I can lean on the compound there as the wall, the parapet. So Swami comes to the veranda, and I'm thinking, probably it was a freak thing, he coming and seeing us at 10 o'clock. He gets out from the veranda, he makes a beeline, I'm at the back, he comes there, and he makes a vibhuti and puts in my hand. and I'm hollering and crying. Finally I have reached. I can die, and I'm hollering. And he says in Hindi, "Aise nahi rona," don't cry like this. I think I scared him stiff with my crying. So he went back and he goes to the men's side, and my husband is there, and he stands up and tells him, he says, "I brought my wife, she's sick." Swami says, "I know, come in." So he takes my parents first inside. They talk to him. They don't tell him, he doesn't ask them about my illness, and they don't tell him anything about my illness. They all come out. Then I and my husband go with my children. The first thing Swami does was, the rooms were even more rustic than what they are today, the interview rooms. There's this little old curtain. It was actually very old curtain. So he takes us inside. He closes the curtain. And you know how Swami stands next to you? He's like this. He looks at me. I'm probably an inch shorter than he is. So he looks at me and he says, in Tamil, in my language, he says, I don't know how many Tamilians are here. And he said, "Amma, enna thavippe enna paakradhukku." That means, how much of pining you had done. He said, twice you almost got onto the plane, you couldn't make it. He says, I feel it right here. See, the secret of that, the whole thing was, and we had a wonderful interview. I came out into the front room without asking Swami that I was sick. I totally forgot about it. But just before I left, I told him, I have been sick. He says, I know. By the way, I've been sick, Yeah, they talk about in the olden days doing tapas in the Himalayas with one leg. I believe I've done tapas without two legs, But that's the kind of journey. But he gave me vibhuti and he cured me and everything after that. But what I'm trying to get to all of you is, it is not like 1, 2, 3, here is God, let the miracle come, take me away. No. I am very convinced that God gives us tutorials. And without the tutorials and the clinical experiences, we never graduate. Some of these tutorials are very hard to take, but sweeter is the success in the graduation. I'm very convinced about it because I can do the work of 10 women today. I've never been as energetic as I've been for the last 20 years. And he can remake your life like nobody can. I don't know what God is. Do you? I only know what other people say, this is God. But I know here is a being who can do for me that nobody else can do.